And you excited? Woohoo! Today I thought I'd talk a little bit. I said, how do grown-ups fight? And when I say grown-ups, I don't mean those of us who have attained a certain age. I mean people who are actually acting like grown-ups, right? Who've actually grown up emotionally and spiritually. Hey, Jay, nice to see you. Good to see you, my friend. Right. How do healthy couples fight? Because healthy couples do fight. That absolutely happens, right? But how do we bring these principles into it in such a way that it allows us to fight in a way that's healthy, right? So what is it? It's a disagreement. What are the differences between kind of healthy fighting and fighting that is violating these principles and is not healthy? Um, and I have to thank my good friend Shauna for this because she does talk a lot about this in her relationship course. And it's about, what is confrontation versus conflict. Oh, thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. He says, beautiful lady. um, and so how do I see this? Like, how am I learning to see this, right? How am I learning to see this in my own relationships? And how do I want to fight, I guess you could say. I think one of the really negative things about ways a lot of us fight is we make the other person wrong. We are in judgment of the other person, and so we're like, well, this thing you did is wrong. This belief you have is wrong. Whatever that is, being in judgment of somebody, and that's basically stepping outside of our bounds, right? That's our circle. That's stepping outside of that. Hi, Mimi. So when we step outside of that and we're saying, okay, what you're doing is wrong, what you're thinking is wrong, right? Because remember I said that each of us owns ourself. We each get to make a free choice and decision about our actions as long as they are not violating these principles of property rights or violating our agreements. So when we get together in a couple and we have to bring that same tolerance, that same understanding that other person is a free person. They are free to do the things hey, Rachel, unless we've created an actual agreement, like, okay, we're not going to sleep with other people if we're in this relationship. You might even say, okay, we're not going to have dinner by ourselves with a member of the opposite sex if we're in this relationship. See? So it's okay. So zoom in on the poster. Oh, good idea. I should try to zoom in on it. I don't know if it shows up in a mirror image or not on one of my things, but it says, first of all, it begins with, I'm an aware being. I own my body. That's the next lane. I own my body fully. I own my creations. Then we have the level of the deal, which talks about how do we create a good exchange. So relationships are all about the level of the deal. They're all about how do we make an exchange with somebody, because relationships are all about exchange. Hey, Douglas. How do we make a healthy exchange with someone? How do we make a valid exchange with them in a relationship? And it comes down to, we have to have a mutual understanding of what's going on. Most of the time it's miscommunication. We don't have a similar standard. We have an expectation that isn't being met, but the other person doesn't understand what that expectation is, right? Not fully. Or to them it's not like the norm and they haven't agreed to that expectation. You see? Now, when you do sit down, you say, okay, this is really what I want. This is what I need. This is my expectation. The other person can agree to do it. If they don't do it, then you have to decide where to go from there. Okay. But you can't force them to do it. You see? So, and recognizing they're not wrong for not doing it. That just may not be their way of behaving. They may not, they may just have a different way of being in a relationship. They have different cultural understandings of what it means to be in a relationship, different family understandings. And being open to that and saying, okay, well, that's not wrong, but that isn't how I would like to be in a relationship, you see? So that has to, starting from that perspective, like what you're doing isn't wrong, but this is what I would like. This is what I need to be happy in a relationship, and this is why. That's how you come together and have an agreement and discussion without it being like, well, you did this to me and you shouldn't have done that, and pushing all of this judgment and condemnation on the other person, right? Then the other person lashes back with something very similar, right? They lash back and they're like, well, you shouldn't be so judgmental, and this is fine for me. It's, if you don't like it, then, there's something wrong with you, right? So we flip it around and we do the same thing back. And that's how we have a big fight where both people are accusing each other of being wrong, instead of recognizing each person has a sovereign right to be and to behave in the way they wish and feel comfortable. And that if you're going to change those behaviors by coming together in agreement, you do it without judgment, because it's the judgment in there that makes it really hard for the other person to see your point of view. It makes it really hard for them to be open to what you're trying to share with them when they feel judged, right? So if I'm feeling judged, if I'm feeling like I'm being made wrong or being made bad for who I am, then then I'm resistant. I'm resistant to hearing about it, right? I try to be open if someone's going to share something with me and say, hey, I feel like I'd like this, or, something you've done has upset me, or whatever it is. I try to be open to that, and I try to see it. I'm like, okay, well, I could see how it would do that. Let me see, if I can change my behavior, as long as it's not something core to me, right? Because I love the other person and I want them to be happy. But if I'm attacked at it with a level of judgment that I was wrong, I'm like, I wasn't wrong necessarily in what I did. Might not have been the way you wanted me to do it, right? But and it might not have been the best thing to do, right? Sometimes we don't do the best thing, that, we're not in the best space in a relationship. We're not doing the best thing for the relationship. We're doing what we're used to doing. We're doing what's the norm for us, especially for me, because I've been single a long time. So, that's, but not coming at the other person either way with an attitude of you're wrong in judgment, just with, this is how I would like it to be. This is what I need. And, do you feel like you could do that for me? Do you feel like you could give that to me? You see, totally different attitude is just so much more open and respectful and allowing of the other person to be who they are and be in their space. So for me, when I want to have it, when people are having a disagreement, that is really what I'm looking for. And so it says, Jay says, what about real relationship? I'm not sure what you mean, Jay, by a real relationship. Are you meaning like a love relationship, like a marriage or something? Because that is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like when you're in a relationship, like a marriage or a love relationship. How do we deal with stuff that comes up? Do we get upset? Do we blow up at the other person? That kind of blowing up at somebody is coming from maybe frustration, legitimate frustration, hurt, etc. But it's also a sense that I've been wronged, right? To some extent, versus, this person is behaving in their way and their understanding, and it's not necessarily wrong, but maybe it's something that doesn't feel good to me. So I want to we should have a conversation about it and see. And if they're not able to do what I need, then, you have to ask that choice of, do you want to be in the relationship? Because then that's the next piece, right? That's what it comes down to. Sorry, I don't know why my the screen keeps blacking out. But anyway, yeah. So Jay says, yes, a love relationship. Yeah. So Jay, that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? People think that, love relationships might be all explosive and stuff like that. And that's not, that doesn't usually end up being a very positive love relationship. So one of the things to think about is, when you're in a conflict, right? I know some people who really completely avoid conflicts. Some friends of mine so avoid conflicts that they don't really tell the truth to people that they're in a relationship with, in a marriage with, or sometimes even in a business partnership with. They just leave. right? And then that becomes a serious issue as well. So how do we deal with conflict? They always used to say that, like, there are the three ways: fight, flight, or freeze. But there's actually a fourth way. So when they studied particularly female groups, they found that there's a fourth way that they deal with conflict or fights, and that is to appease. And that's quite predominant in female groups. It's to appease. It's to just be like, oh, it's okay, and just kind of try to smooth things over, or maybe not say what's really going on, not say what you actually think or feel, because you're afraid it's going to start a fight or it's going to be a disagreement. And so that is, when I'm looking at this and I'm trying to think, like, what are my reactions when it comes to that, because, growing up in a household that, conflict was a pretty serious thing. Hey, Ryan. When you had a father with a very bad temper and who was like, spanked people, was abusive, basically, in a way, and that environment. And I think a lot of us potentially did grow up in households like that, where there was a lot of spanking and physical punishment and so on. That can shift how we adapt and how we deal with conflict, right? Are we afraid of it? Do we avoid it? Do we step in and really like go for it and get more aggressive? And so just looking at each of us has to look at our own patterns and ask, what is the healthy way for us to deal with conflict? Because just avoiding it, or getting more aggressive, or fighting about it, or freezing, none of those help solve or resolve the issue. So how do we actually move forward and resolve the issue? I find that for a lot of women, and myself included, one of our first reactions can be to appease the situation. We're trying to be like, calm it down, okay, because any kind of strong anger towards us feels very unsafe. It can make us feel afraid. So we want to calm it down. Some women will just freeze or just like go away, right? It's not typically, then if that doesn't work, maybe what happens next? You might fight. You might stand up and fight. And if that doesn't work, then go away, right? So people usually have a series of ways in which they deal with a conflict, okay? It's not just one way. They may try this and then this and then this. So think about what your pattern is, if you have a pattern. But either way, in any of these patterns, right, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or appease, they're not actually dealing with the underlying issue and resolving the real issue. So that's the piece we want to get to, okay? How do we really resolve the real issue of what is going on? And that's where we have to take a deep breath, sometimes a few deep breaths, right? Go into ourselves and start asking different types of questions. Where is this really coming from, right? Where is this fight really coming from? Do I want to hurt the other person? Do I want to be judgmental? No. So like, where do I want to try to meet them where they're at, right? So honor yourself, honor the other person, right? Allow the emotions, right? Say, okay, I understand, I'm feeling this way, I'm getting triggered, I'm getting upset, let's feel that emotion, but I don't necessarily have to go and dump it on the other person, right? If these triggers are coming up and upsetting me, then maybe I need to go take a little time alone. Maybe I need to go meditate. Maybe I need to go pray about it and say, what's really happening? Why am I getting upset about this? What is this other person's message to me, right? What is this other person's message to me? Are they what's kind of the underlying message of what they're saying, right? Because they might be saying a bunch of stuff that's like, you did this and you did that and you did this wrong, but maybe underneath it's like they're hurt, right? Or they just want to feel loved. So by stepping back out of the judgment avalanche, right? Where as soon as you get that avalanche, you're doing this and you didn't do this and you didn't do that, right? Immediately our initial reaction is just to resist, right? To push back and then push it back on them and say, well, this was your fault for that and this was your fault for that, or to justify ourselves, right? Justify ourselves. So instead of that, just step back and say, okay, all right, I see I'm getting triggered because I've got all this judgment coming at me, right? Which I feel is unfair and unjustified. Now let me just take some time and think about it and think about what the other person, what's underlying the other person's words, right? And not just attack back based on what they're saying. Now, if this is a continuous pattern in the relationship, and then it can be an issue, right? I mean, if you want it to work long term, then both people have to be willing to do this process. Both people have to be willing to see each other, just try to see the good in each other, and to not come at each other with judgment. Just one person doing it in a relationship can definitely help, but it's definitely something that both people want to get together and do if possible. And I think when people do this, and it shows a respect for each other, which I think is it's a really good sign for a relationship. It's a really good sign that relationship can make it, because both people are respecting each other. They're not acting out of judgment and being judgmental towards somebody, and always being critical. It's one of the there's like 4 warning signs, which if therapists see these things in a relationship, they are pretty sure that relationship is going to end. Right? They're sure it's going to end in divorce. And being very critical or judgmental of the other person is one of these signs. One of the ones that's like for sure it's just like out there, like really quickly, is if one of the other parties has disdain for the other person, right? So that's taking it to a whole other level. But if there's a lot of judgment and criticism in the relationship, then that does not bode well for that relationship at all, which is why what I'm talking about is how do we come to the relationship with that. Hey, Jay, he says, bye, beautiful angel. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for watching. Good night. I know it's late over there where you guys are. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little discussion about, how do we fight? How do we fight as adults? And is there a healthy way to fight in healthy relationships? So anyway, I'm just going to say goodbye. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.